In today's conversation, I speak to Dr. Randy Ross about how to have a remarkable culture. We discuss how hope is a dynamic motivator tied to goal setting that provides energy to pursue goals. In this conversation, along with 4 key takeaways, I outline how individual team and organisational leadership cultures ultimately shape the customer's reality. I create clear thinking and decisive leaders who can amplify their influence. Contact me to find out how I can help you or your organisation. And today our guest is Randy Ross. How are you doing?
I am doing well. Thank you for asking, Judith.
Well, Randy, what's the most ridiculous thing a client has asked you to do?
That's a fun question. The most ridiculous thing a client has asked me to do. Um, we have the privilege of working with some rather remarkable clients, clients that are trying to create organizations that are vibrant and relationally rich. I don't think that I've ever had a client ask me to do anything that was really crazy or out of the ordinary, but I had a lot of fun at different corporate events, riding mechanical bulls and going up in hot air balloons and doing some really great adventures with some groups. But I don't know that there's anything really ridiculous that a client asked me to do.
That sounds fun, though, actually, what you're saying. So, Randy, tell us a little bit about you then.
Well, Judith, I spent the first part of my career in the not-for-profit space, had the privilege of working with some rather remarkable nonprofit organizations that did great good in the community and were highly impactful. And that was a great adventure for me. Learned a lot of lessons in that space that I was able to transport over into the for-profit arena with great impact and still espouse a lot of those practices and principles today to our clients to help them create a relationally rich environment.
Brilliant. Thank you. Now, I understand that you talk about the power of hope to drive performance. Tell me about that.
Oh, well, it's interesting. I wrote a book a few years back during COVID called Fireproof Happiness.
Mm.
And I did it actually as a challenge from a friend because we were having coffee one day and said, we don't know how long this challenge is going to last and what it's going to do to people emotionally. And I really want to challenge you to write a book on hope. And I
Mm.
thought, well, that's intriguing because if you ask people, everybody agrees that hope is absolutely essential to sustain the human spirit, that it's an emotional component that's necessary for life. But if you ask them to define hope, very few people can articulate what hope actually is, much less how to elevate levels of hope. So I
Mm.
thought that's intriguing. So I really dug into the research to see, could I find scientifically validated, peer reviewed papers on the power, the efficacy of hope. And I came up with over 200 different studies. And so what I really wanted to do was I wanted to condense that information and articulate it simply so that anybody could take the ideas and principles, grasp them, and apply them to life. And what I found in the process was that hope is a very powerful driver, not only of happiness, health, longevity, but also performance. And so the idea of being able to infuse hope, or sometimes people say build resilience into the workforce, can have a profound impact, um, not only on meaning, fulfillment, and satisfaction, but on productivity as well.
Brilliant. It is true, actually. I mean, hope is something hard to define, but isn't it also something that a lot of leaders would never admit to having?
Well, what strikes me is interesting. You've probably heard this phrase before. Sales leaders are notorious for bantering this about. They say hope is not a strategy. Have you heard that
Mm.
before? Well, I disagree with that wholeheartedly. I think that no strategy will ever be effective if it's not infused with hope. If your strategy, if your objectives, if your um, uh, desired destination is not hope filled, if your people, put it this way, if your people involved in any endeavor you call them to participate in don't have the hope that it will ever be successful. In other words, if they are hopeless, do you think that strategy will be successful? Well, the answer is obviously no, right? So hope actually is your best strategy. because every strategy has to be hope infused if you're ever going to have the prospect of seeing it become a reality.
Okay, that makes sense. So, if that's the case, then can you see hope then actually being something that does drive performance, or is it more of an abstract thing to shoot for?
No, we make it very concrete, and we want to help organizations practically apply it, because the way we define hope, and I think it's a clear um, pathway to help people begin to grasp the concept, is that hope is a dynamic motivational system that's tied to inspirational goal setting. In other words, there is a desired destination that you want to get toward, achieve. And hope is the dynamic motivational system that provides the energy, the sustenance that allows you to pursue that pathway. And they're actually what we call buoyancy beliefs of hope. And back to your earlier question, Judith, we've seen, and the research bears out, that organizations who practice these principles, who infuse resilience into the workforce, who help eliminate anxiety and stress, outperform their low hope counterparts by almost 15%. And that's a huge boost when you think that no other infusion, other than simply helping them put into practice the principles that we talk about, could give you that sort of a lift in performance.
That's unbelievable. It's
Hope-filled,
remarkable.
hope-filled individuals in a sales setting will sell more in 6 days than their counterparts will sell in 7 days. Or if you just want to put it differently, sell more in 4 days than their counterparts will sell in 5 days. It's a powerful, powerful idea, because hope is essential for health, um, because how you see tomorrow will then have an effect on how you behave today. Think about that. If you're hopeless about the prospects of tomorrow, then chances are you're not going to take great care of yourself today, because you don't have any, you know, elevated anticipation of tomorrow being brighter than today. On the other hand, if you're hope filled and you see a brighter tomorrow, if you have the capacity to build a brighter tomorrow, no matter how dark today may be, then you're going to act in ways that are productive for your health and well being in the long run. It's a very, very impactful idea to be able to help people put into practice some basic principles that can elevate their hope.
Brilliant. Thank you. It made me think about that experiment with the rat where they had a load of rats and they were all swimming. And then they got to about 15 minutes and they started to drown because they just couldn't swim anymore. So they took them out and then they, basically dried them off, let them rest for just a tiny bit. And then they put them back in the water. And their expectation was that they would just maybe swim for another couple of minutes and then drown. But they actually swam for another 60 hours.
That's right.
And they believe it was the hope that that the rats thought that they were going to be rescued. So they just kept on going. And that's amazing.
That's a great research based analogy, because the same thing happens in human behavior when we're talking about human motivational behavior. Just that anticipation of being able to reach a desired destination, or the infusion of additional um, sustenance, strength, if you will,
Mm,
provides the motivation to continue to persevere even through difficult times.
Okay. So bearing that in mind, then, is it possible to create a remarkable culture? And if so, how would you define remarkable?
um, the name of our organization is remarkable, and I wrote a book back in 2014 called Remarkable. The
Mm,
third edition is going to be coming out here shortly, if it's not already available on books and bookstore shelves, wherever you find your best books. But remarkable means that you provide a service or a product. You live life in such a way that you profoundly impact those around you, that you go above and beyond expectations. You provide world-class service. You mark someone's life for good to such a degree, Judith, that when they leave your presence, they have this irrepressible desire to talk about you and the difference that you made in their lives. And when people are remarking about you and the difference that you've made, then you indeed have become remarkable. And so remarkable means that you leave an indelible impression on the people around you and you leave a positive wake in your world. That's what remarkable means.
Now, this I like, and I'm very much aware that there are loads of leaders out there who are remarkable. How do they ensure or enable their organization to be remarkable?
Well, we define a remarkable culture, and this may be helpful to put it into perspective. A remarkable culture has three qualities or characteristics, and it doesn't matter what organization you're talking about, because when we talk about culture, culture is going to happen wherever people get together, and you're either going to have a culture by design. In other words, you're giving it intentionality, thoughtful reflection. You're constantly trying to make it better. Or you can have a culture by default. And that happens in organizations. It happens in philanthropic groups. It happens in athletic clubs. It happens even in your home. And most people don't think about the fact that you have a culture in your home. And if you're not constantly trying to make it better, then it will eventually deteriorate. But the trilogy of a remarkable culture is simply this. It's a place where people believe the best in one another. They want the best for one another. And so therefore they expect the best from one another. Now, those three elements, believing the best in speaks to trust. Wanting the best for speaks to connection and compassion. And then expecting the best from is obviously accountability. And those characteristics, when they define an organization or a culture, then we say that's a remarkable culture, because you'll see a relationally rich environment. You'll see heightened morale and motivation. You'll see accelerated innovation and creativity. And most importantly, you'll see elevated productivity. And so that's what we try to strive to help organizations attain.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. And how, out of all the organizations you work with, how many of them have like a semblance of remarkable culture before they work with you?
Well, I think there are two categories of organizations that we work with. The first are those that have remarkable cultures, but they always are. If an organization has a remarkable culture, they're always wanting to make it better because they know it's never good enough. They're constantly focused on what can we do to invest in our people? What can we do to codify our culture? So we work with those who have extraordinary cultures. And then we also work with organizations that recognize the fact that they have a lot of work to do on culture. The groups that we don't work with are those in the middle that you have to convince that culture is an impactful thing, uh,
Yeah.
because they still don't get it. They have grown accustomed to the revolving door. They've grown accustomed to high attrition. They don't mind paying extraordinarily high amounts for replacement cost. And those are the kind of organizations that are kind of churn and burn toxic environments that, if they don't understand um, engaging the people emotionally, they don't understand, Gallup's research on engagement, if they don't put a high priority on investing deeply in their people, if they're okay with the revolving door of talent where it's hard to attract and retain top talent, then we really have very little that we can offer to them. So we work with those who know they need it and call us in because they're desperate, and those who are striving to become better because they know that culture is an ongoing conversation. It's not just an event.
Mm. I think that really is the key part, is that whilst you can have a start point, a catalyst that makes you want to start to improve the culture, there never is going to be an end point. And in fact, if you're not paying attention, no matter how much money you've spent and time to create the culture you want, it will drift if you're not making sure that you're actually aware of what's going on.
Absolutely. I mean, let's back up and let's define culture, because culture, that term, is bannered about quite a bit. And it's almost become common rhetoric to talk about culture without any substance behind it. So
Mhm.
our definition of culture Culture is the collective expression of the values, the beliefs, and the behaviors that individuals bring to any endeavor. So there are certain behaviors that we are expecting from our people because we're trying to drive metrics, we're trying to increase sales, we're trying to hit, our numbers and accomplish the things that we set out to do. So we're focused a lot on behaviors, but those behaviors leaders must recognize are driven by those individuals' beliefs, what they believe to be true about the organization, what they true to believe about the product, what they believe to be true about the customer base. And so it's driven by a beliefs, and those beliefs are undergirded by certain values.
Mm.
We talk a lot about corporate values, but the primary objective of leadership is to help attach people's personal values and their passion to corporate objectives. So to your point, every single hire that an organization makes will either crystallize or will compromise the culture of that organization because it depends upon an alignment of values. Do the values that the individuals bring to the table align with the values of the organization? And the values that the organization espouses, do they not only espouse them, but do they embody them? Not do they embrace them, but do they embody them? And are they imbued throughout the life of the organization? There are a lot of organizations who have great mottos and values listed on the walls and on the placards in the hallway. But if you walk through the halls and you talk to people, oftentimes not only can they not recall the values, but if you remind them of the values, they roll their eyes because they don't believe that the organization lives them out. And so it has to be what we call a system of value centricity, where everyone's values are in alignment. And when they're in alignment and they run parallel, then great things can happen.
Lots of truths there. Let's listen to a quick advert.
The Maverick Paradox. Judith Germain is an author, speaker, consultant, mentor, and trainer, and the leading authority on maverick leadership. She is the founder of the Maverick Paradox, which supports organizations to enhance their leadership capabilities and to help business owners develop and grow their businesses. Judith enables individuals, business owners, and organizations to improve their impact and influence. She is also HR Zone's leadership columnist, an international online radio host, and her expert opinion has appeared in national, international, and trade press.
Welcome back to the Maverick Paradox. This is the podcast for the pathologically curious. When I was in HR, one of the things I always made sure was that we would have the values embedded throughout the organisation. And what I meant from that was not only did you train it, but you recruited to it, you set objectives to it, you managed performance by it, you did disciplinaries by it. Like every single thing that's hitting the employee and other stakeholders had to be referenced via the values, because otherwise, how would that work?
Absolutely. And because what you're saying is that all the values have to be aligned and are synergistic. The values of the organization should act like a magnet. They should be so strong that they both attract, but they also repel. They attract the right kind of talent whose values align with the organization, but they should be so strong and talked about so frequently that if someone's values don't align, they're repelled from the organization. And until an organization repels the wrong kind of people, it will always be in jeopardy of compromising their culture.
I'm liking this discussion because it's making me think, and I think that's probably the biggest thing that undermines culture change, is that it's all very well attracting people, but it's the repelling bit that people don't like doing, especially if it appears that the person that needs to be repelled because they're toxic or they're just not living the values are the people that are perceived to bring in the money.
Well, and are organizations bold enough? Are they courageous enough to make sure that if someone's values are not aligned, that they move them out of the organization effectively? Because you and I have been around long enough. We've seen so many organizations that have toxic individuals, but because they're high producers, they're kept around. The challenge with that is that deflates morale across the enterprise, because you think about the high performer who, yes, they sell a lot, but in the process they kill operations, or they don't create a relationally rich environment because their behavior is so off-putting to other team members. In the short run, that may produce great results. In the long run, you're going to lose a lot of good people because they don't want to be around that kind of behavior. And so I think it is important that the values are something that are so strong and so solid that if anyone compromises those values, you have the courage to let them go.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's where you see the money, because people, as you say, they've seen one side of it, the money that they bring in, but they're not seeing the money that's been lost through high sickness rates, high turnover, lack of people starting, and all this kind of stuff. And I think that's probably why places like HR are important, because they're looking at the fuller picture, not just the marketing picture or such like.
Well, I think it's the difference between a short-term and a long-term view. Because if you have a short-term view and it's going to hit the bottom line this next month or this quarter, then I think a lot of organizations compromise themselves because of fiduciary responsibility to shareholders. But what they don't realize is when they do that, what they're doing in the long run is they're compromising the morale of their stakeholders. So the question is, and I've seen this happen in countless times in organizations, do you put a greater emphasis on your shareholder, or do you put a greater emphasis upon your stockholder?
Good question.
And your stakeholders. Your stakeholders are your employees. Your stakeholders are your supply chain. It's everybody who's impacted by the business that you conduct. Your shareholders, on the other hand, may own a small piece of the company, but what they need to realize is that if the stakeholders are compromised, in the long run, the shareholders will suffer. Because think about it this way. If you're focused on a good customer experience, the only way to provide a great customer experience is to create a strong employee experience, because your customers will be treated like you treat your employees. And that's what culture is all about. So we need to focus on investing in our employees in such a way that they turn around and they share the love with the client base. If we take care of our people will take care of the clients.
Absolutely. I wrote an article some time ago about that very thing, where I say that your leadership culture is the root of your customers' reality.
That's right.
Because, as individuals, we have our own leadership culture of one, our authenticity, our beliefs, our values, all those kind of stuff. And then we come into work or the workplace. And as soon as we start to interact with other people, we have created a leadership culture, attitude to risk, psychological safety, all this kind of stuff. And then that culture is then supported by the organizational culture. So how is it appraised? What's disciplined? What's supported? That kind of thing. And then the customer sees the output of that. So if you've got a micromanagement culture or a blame culture and a customer is complaining, that person is not going to be trying to resolve the problem. They're trying to make sure that the customer is aware that it's not their fault. So you see that in that, I'm upset with this. It's not my fault. It's like, no, ask if it's your fault. It needs to be dealt with, but it's not my fault.
Right.
Yeah. So it's quite interesting, and that all goes back to that first individual, really.
It does, because it's a matter of taking ownership and responsibility for the outcomes, right? And if I'm in an environment where I'm fearful of repercussions, or I'm being micromanaged, or I'm not allowed to grow through experiencing failures from time to time, if there's not a psychologically safe environment, as you put it, if I don't have the opportunity to stretch my wings and try new things in order to increase my capacity, which ultimately was going to result in some failures along the way. If I'm not applauded for those failures as I fall forward, then you're right. No one's going to want to take ownership. They're going to point the finger of blame at other people. But it's only when they put their fingerprints on it and they take responsibility for making it better that we see organizations begin to excel. So it has to do, culture has to do with what kind of an environment are we creating for our people? Is it relationally rich? Because we know psychologically that people thrive in relationally rich environments. And unfortunately, there are a lot of toxic work environments. And we know that because of the Gallup research. It's for me, it's a very sad thing to think that here in the United States, only a third of the American workforce is what Gallup calls actively engaged. Globally, it's even worse than that. So if you think about the fact that only, let's say 25% of your people are excited about getting up in the morning and coming to work, what would happen, just theoretically speaking, what would happen if you could get 5, 10, 20% more into that actively engaged category without changing anything else in the organization? What would that mean for the bottom line? What would that mean for productivity? What would that mean for morale? Because here's what I believe to be true. Judith, I think the greatest asset that most organizations have is the untapped latent energy that lies within the margins of life of their people right now that they haven't been able to bring to the surface because they haven't been able to create an inspirational environment where people get excited about coming to work. They like hanging out with the people they work with. They feel like they're doing something meaningful, and that they're a part of something larger than self. And that's what a good culture provides. When we get to that point, we can tap into the discretionary effort that lies within the margins of life. Because here's the reality. We can rent people's hands and their heads, but their hearts, they'll only offer that voluntarily. We can't demand that. But when we capture their hearts, then amazing things can happen and we can create remarkable organizations.
That's amazing. I think that's a good place to end. And I love the sentiment there. And I think it's something that organizations have forgotten because we do, demand people's hearts, but do nothing really to earn it a lot of the time.
Well, it's fun to be able to work with organizations. It's great to be able to take these concepts, the principles that we espouse in the book Remarkable are drawn from the field of axiology. And it's a powerful, powerful field of study, applied axiology to change and codify the culture of your organization. So anybody who's interested, I would encourage them to get a copy of our book, Remarkable.
You can't really leave us on that teasing note without really telling us briefly what you mean by codifying the culture.
So there are certain principles of axiology, and many of your listeners may not know, but axiology is a strain of philosophy. And it's all about values and value constructs and value creation. At its very heart, axiology is an attempt to define and measure good. But how it's applied to organizational life, it's all about creating movements of good within organizational life. So when we talk about codifying culture, what I'm talking about is creating a culture where people are inspired to bring their best to work every day. And they want to bring more to the table than they take away and to create this powerful influence that literally changes the world for good. And some people may say, well, yeah, but my organization, we're not changing the world for good. We're not curing cancer. We're not, sending people to the moon. It doesn't matter. Robert Stevens made this powerful comment. He said, advertising is a tax you pay for being unremarkable.
Oh, wow. That's good.
When we are remarkable, people talk about us. And remarkable means that no matter what you sell or what you do, it's not what you do, it's how you do it. Are you impacting lives in a positive way? Does your business make a difference in the world because it solves a problem for people, that it improves the human condition? And so the principles of axiology are about positioning the organization to make a positive impact on the world.
Brilliant. Well, a great place to end there, Andy. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure to be with you, Judith. Thanks for the opportunity to have this conversation today.
You're welcome. And thank you out there for tuning in to the Maverick Paradox podcast. I am Judith Germain, your host, and I hope you've enjoyed today's conversation. As a leader, you know that having a strong level of influence is essential to achieving your goals. But how do you know if you're truly making an impact? Take the How Influential Are You scorecard to get a clear picture of your current level of influence and identify areas for improvement. With personalised recommendations and valuable strategies, you'll be able to amplify your influence and make a real difference as a leader. Don't miss this opportunity to improve your leadership skills. Take the scorecard now at amplifyyourinfluence.scoreapp.com.